"Don't touch that," the officer said, his voice sharp enough to cut through the hallway before anyone even looked up. The words landed first, then the sound of something hitting tile, soft, out of place, like paper slipping from a grip that had been holding on too tightly. The courthouse hallway froze in that strange way it always did when authority spoke too loudly. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a pale, unforgiving glow. Shoes paused mid-step. Conversations thinned into silence. Danielle Brooks didn't look up right away. She was on one knee, gathering the scattered pages of a thick file that had spilled across the floor, each sheet marked with careful tabs and handwritten notes. One page had slid farther than the others, stopping just beside the polished toe of a uniform boot. She reached for it, her fingers steady, deliberate, like this wasn't the first time the world had tried to rush her into reacting. "I said move," the officer added, quieter now, but heavier, like the second warning mattered more than the first. His name tag read Ryan Cole, the metal catching the light every time he shifted his weight. Danielle's hand paused just inches from the paper. For a brief second, the only sound was the faint buzz of electricity in the ceiling and the distant echo of a courtroom door closing somewhere down the corridor. Then she picked the page up anyway. Slowly, carefully, as if time belonged to her, not him. A few feet away, a young public defender adjusted his tie, eyes flicking between them before settling firmly on the floor. A clerk clutched a clipboard a little tighter. No one spoke. No one stepped in. The system had its own rhythm, and moments like this slipped into it unnoticed, unchallenged. Danielle rose to her feet, brushing a trace of dust from the corner of the file. Up close, the sleeve of her blazer showed faint wear at the edges, the kind that came from years of use, not neglect but persistence. Her posture was straight, but not rigid. Controlled. Measured. She finally looked at him. Not defiant. Not afraid. Just present. Ryan let out a short breath through his nose, something between a scoff and a laugh. "People like you always think you've got somewhere important to be," he muttered, glancing past her as if she were already out of the way. Danielle said nothing. Her grip tightened slightly around the folder, the knuckles of her right hand paling for just a moment before relaxing again. Somewhere behind them, a set of double doors opened, and a rush of cooler air slipped into the hallway, carrying with it the faint murmur of voices and the distant shuffle of proceedings already underway. Danielle turned her head just slightly toward the sound, as if orienting herself, recalibrating. Then she stepped forward, not hurried, not hesitant, just enough to pass him. For a fraction of a second, their shoulders nearly aligned. Ryan didn't move aside so much as allow the space to exist, like it had always belonged to him. She walked past without brushing him, without looking back. The hallway slowly exhaled. Conversations resumed in low tones. Shoes found their rhythm again against the tile. But something lingered in the air, something subtle and unfinished, like a question no one had asked out loud. Danielle adjusted the folder against her side, her thumb resting along the edge of the top page, feeling the texture of the paper beneath her skin. Her steps were quiet, almost soundless, but each one carried forward with a certainty that didn't match the way she had been seen just moments before. And behind her, Officer Ryan Cole watched her go for a second longer than he needed to, his brow tightening just slightly, as if something about the silence she left behind didn't sit right with him, though he couldn't yet say why. Ryan Cole shifted his weight as the hallway returned to motion, but the rhythm felt off, like a song skipping half a beat. He adjusted the collar of his uniform, fingers brushing against the stiff fabric as if something there needed fixing, even though nothing had changed. The name on his chest still read the same. The badge still caught the same light. And yet, his eyes followed the woman longer than he intended, tracking the quiet steadiness in her steps as she moved toward the far end of the corridor. "Hey, Cole," another officer called from behind, his voice casual, almost bored. "You coming or what?" Ryan did not answer right away. He watched as Danielle reached the set of double doors at the end of the hall, the ones leading into courtroom B. Most people hesitated there, adjusted their jacket, checked their phone, looked around like they were not sure they belonged. She did none of that. She simply pushed the door open and disappeared inside. Ryan blinked once, slow, then turned back, forcing his attention onto the familiar. "Yeah," he muttered, starting forward again. "Just handling traffic." The other officer chuckled under his breath, already moving past him. You always are. Their footsteps echoed briefly before being swallowed by the wider noise of the building, but Ryan's mind did not settle as easily. There had been something about her. Not what she wore. Not the file. Not even the silence. It was the way she had not rushed. The way she had not reacted. Like she had seen worse than him and decided he was not worth the energy. He exhaled through his nose again, sharper this time, as if pushing the thought out. People came through this place every day thinking they were important. Lawyers with shiny shoes and louder voices. Defendants pretending they had nothing to lose. Families holding on to hope like it could change a verdict. He had seen all of it. He knew how to read people in seconds. And she had not fit the pattern. Down the hall, a small hand tugged at a woman's sleeve. A little girl, no older than 7, pointed toward the courtroom doors Danielle had entered. Is she going to help someone? The girl asked, her voice soft but clear in the open space. The woman glanced in that direction, then down at the child. Probably just another lawyer, she said, distracted, already pulling the girl along. Ryan caught the exchange without meaning to. His jaw shifted slightly. Lawyer? No. She did not look like one. No briefcase. No expensive heels. No attitude. Just that worn folder and a look that did not ask permission to exist. He turned toward the security desk near the center of the hallway, where a bailiff was flipping through a stack of papers. Courtroom be already in session? Ryan asked, his tone even, almost routine. The bailiff did not look up at first. About to be. Judge is already inside. Waiting on one more. Ryan leaned a fraction closer, resting his hand on the edge of the desk. One more who? The bailiff paused, finally lifting his eyes. There was a flicker of recognition there, but not the kind Ryan was used to. Not respect. Not caution. Something else. Measured. You did not hear? The bailiff asked. Ryan's brow tightened. Hear what? The bailiff tapped the top page lightly with his finger, then turned it just enough for Ryan to catch a glimpse of the printed header. The name sat there in clean, bold letters. Brooks, Danielle. Ryan's eyes landed on it for a second too long. The letters did not mean anything yet, but they did not feel empty either. New oversight. The bailiff added, casual but precise. They are making some changes. Today is the first day. Ryan straightened, a small tension settling between his shoulders. Oversight for what? The bailiff gave a slight shrug, already turning back to his papers. You will see. The words hung there, simple and unfinished. Ryan stepped back from the desk, his hand falling to his side. For a moment, the hallway seemed quieter again, like it had pulled its breath in just before something shifted. He glanced once more toward the closed doors of Courtroom B. The metal handle reflected a thin line of light, unmoving. Inside, muffled voices had begun to rise, low and structured, the sound of proceedings taking shape. Ryan adjusted his stance, rolling his shoulders back as if resetting himself into the role he understood. Control. Authority. Routine. He had built his career on those things. People either listened, or they learned to. But as he stood there, watching that door, a faint unease traced its way through him, subtle but persistent, like a thought that refused to be ignored. Not fear. Not yet. Just a question. And questions, he knew, had a way of turning into something much harder to control. The courtroom doors did not open again right away, and that was what unsettled him most. Time moved differently inside those rooms, slower, heavier, like every second had weight. Ryan stood just outside the line where the hallway met the courtroom threshold, arms loosely crossed, posture relaxed in a way that looked practiced. People passed behind him, voices low, footsteps soft against the polished floor, but he barely registered them. His attention stayed fixed on that closed door, on the faint murmur bleeding through the wood, structured voices rising and falling in a rhythm he knew well. Proceedings had started. That meant whoever they were waiting for had already arrived. He glanced back toward the bailiff desk, half expecting someone to call him over. To clarify, to confirm whatever this oversight was supposed to be. No one did. The bailiff kept working through his papers, flipping pages with quiet precision, like nothing unusual was happening at all. Ryan shifted again, rolling his jaw slightly. This was routine, he told himself. Courts changed procedures all the time. New supervisors, new policies, new faces that thought they were going to fix everything overnight. It never lasted. It never changed anything that mattered. Still, His eyes drifted back to the name he had seen printed on that page. Brooks, Danielle. He repeated it once in his head, testing it, like a word that should have meant something but did not yet. Names usually came with context. Rank, reputation, rumors. This one had arrived without any of that, slipping into the building like it belonged there before anyone had a chance to question it. A sudden burst of laughter echoed from farther down the hall, sharp and brief, then gone. Ryan barely reacted. Instead, he pushed off the wall and took a few slow steps toward the courtroom doors, stopping just short of the handle. Up close, he could hear more now. The scrape of a chair, papers shifting, a voice, steady and controlled, speaking in measured cadence. Not loud, not forced, just clear. He frowned slightly. That was not the judge, not the attorneys either. Different tone, different weight. He leaned a fraction closer without realizing it, his focus narrowing, the rest of the hallway fading into the background. You were saying the report was filed at 8:42 this morning? The voice inside asked. Female. Calm. Precise. Ryan's brow tightened. There was something familiar in it, not in sound, but in presence. Like the kind of voice that did not need to rise to be heard. A second voice answered, less steady, fumbling slightly over the time. Ryan exhaled quietly, stepping back again, forcing space between himself and the door. It did not make sense. The timeline did not line up. Whoever this Danielle Brooks was, she had walked in less than 5 minutes ago carrying a worn folder and a look that said she had nothing to prove. That was not how people with authority moved. They announced themselves. They were announced. They arrived with attention already on them. Not like that. Not quiet. Not unnoticed. A clerk hurried past him, nearly brushing his shoulder, arms full of files stacked unevenly. Sorry, she muttered without stopping, pushing through the doors into another courtroom down the hall. Ryan barely shifted. His eyes flicked once more to the handle in front of him. Still, unmoving. Inside, the same voice continued, steady as before, asking questions that sounded less like accusations and more like someone pulling truth out piece by piece. No rush. No pressure. Just certainty. He felt that same faint tension settle again, sharper now, like something inside him was trying to connect two things that refused to fit together. The woman in the hallway. The voice in the room. He shook his head once, subtle, almost dismissive. It was a coincidence. It had to be. He had been in this building long enough to know how things worked. There was a structure, a hierarchy. People did not just walk in off the hallway and take control of a courtroom, not without everyone knowing exactly who they were first. And yet, as he stood there, listening to that voice carry through the door, something in that certainty began to thin. Not break. Not yet. Just stretch. Like a line pulled tighter than it was meant to go. Behind him, the hallway carried on, unaware, unchanged. But Ryan Cole remained still, just outside that door, caught in the quiet space between what he thought he understood and something that had not fully revealed itself yet. And for the first time that morning, the confidence he wore so easily did not feel as solid as it had before. Ryan did not realize he was holding his breath until the courtroom door opened just a few inches and a clerk slipped out, pulling it closed softly behind her. The brief gap was enough. A slice of the room revealed itself in a flash of motion and light. Rows of seated figures. The judge elevated at the front. And for less than a second, a clear line of sight to the center of the room where attention had gathered. Ryan's eyes caught the outline of a figure standing near the front table, posture straight, shoulders relaxed, one hand resting lightly against a stack of documents. Then the door clicked shut again. The hallway returned, but something had shifted inside him, subtle but undeniable. He pushed off the wall fully now, stepping forward with more intention, stopping just short of pacing. His fingers brushed along his belt, a habitual movement, grounding, familiar. He had spent years learning how to control a room without raising his voice, how to read tension before it broke, how to step in just enough to remind people where authority lived. That instinct was what had built his reputation. And yet now, standing outside that door, he felt like he was the one being read. From inside, the voice continued, calm as before, each word landing with a kind of quiet precision that did not ask for attention but commanded it anyway. Let us be clear, it said, steady, measured. The timeline does not match your initial statement. There was a pause, not long, just enough to let the weight of that sentence settle. Ryan's jaw tightened slightly. He had heard that tone before, but never from someone he could not place. It was not aggressive, not confrontational. It did not need to be. It simply left no room for anything but truth. He glanced again toward the bailiff desk, then back at the door. No one else seemed concerned. No one else seemed curious. That bothered him more than anything. If something was changing, people usually reacted. They whispered. They watched. They adjusted. Here, the building moved like it always had, as if whatever was happening inside that courtroom was already understood by everyone except him. A pair of attorneys walked past, their conversation low but quick, words overlapping as they reviewed something under their breath. One of them glanced toward Ryan for a second, then away, like he had almost said something but decided against it. Ryan caught that, stored it. Another piece that did not quite fit. He stepped closer again, this time without hesitation, his hand hovering near the door handle but not touching it. Through the wood, the voice inside continued, unwavering. You submitted this report under your badge number, it said. That means accountability follows you, not the paperwork. Ryan's fingers stilled. Badge number. The phrase echoed louder than it should have. His gaze dropped briefly to his own chest, to the metal pin there, the familiar weight of it pressing lightly against the fabric. For the first time that morning, it did not feel like armor. It felt like something that could be examined, measured, questioned. He straightened slightly, shoulders pulling back, as if resetting his stance could restore the balance he was used to. But the feeling lingered, quiet and persistent, like a thread being pulled from somewhere deeper than he expected. Behind him, the hallway continued its steady rhythm. A janitor pushed a cart past, wheels squeaking softly. A phone rang somewhere distant, then stopped. Life moved. Routine held. But Ryan remained anchored to that door, caught between stepping away and stepping in. Inside, a chair shifted. Papers moved. And then the voice spoke again, softer this time, but no less firm. Position does not excuse behavior. It defines responsibility. Ryan's breath slowed, his focus narrowing completely now. That sentence did not belong to someone uncertain. It did not belong to someone new. It belonged to someone who had already decided what kind of standard they were going to hold, regardless of who stood in front of them. He swallowed once, subtle, controlled, but real. The unease that had started as a question was beginning to take shape, not as fear, not yet, but as recognition of something he had not prepared for. Not a person, not a title, something else, something that did not bend easily. His hand lowered from the door without touching it. For the first time, he did not feel like the one in control of the space around him. And he could not explain why. Ryan stepped back from the door, but not far enough to leave. Just enough to create space between himself and something he could not yet define. His hand dropped to his side, fingers flexing once, then stilling. The hallway light flickered faintly overhead, barely noticeable, but it caught his attention anyway, like his senses had sharpened without his permission. Inside the courtroom, the voice paused, and for a brief moment, there was silence. Not empty silence. The kind that follows a question no one is ready to answer. Ryan felt it even through the door, that pause stretching just long enough to make the air feel heavier. Then a chair shifted, and another voice responded, uncertain, careful, choosing words slowly as if each one might be challenged. Ryan exhaled quietly, but it did not release the tension building in his chest. He turned his head slightly, scanning the hallway again. Everything looked the same. Same marble floors. Same muted colors. Same steady flow of people moving in and out of rooms like nothing had changed. But the feeling did not match the picture anymore. A man in a gray suit walked past him, briefcase in hand, eyes forward, focused. Ryan watched him for a second, then looked away. Routine. Everyone here lived inside it. Followed it. Trusted it. He had built his entire career on understanding how to navigate that system, how to stay one step ahead of it when necessary. But now it felt like something had shifted just outside his reach, something that did not follow the same rules. The courtroom door opened again, wider this time. A young clerk stepped out, holding a stack of documents close to her chest. She paused for half a second when she saw Ryan standing there, like she had not expected him to be so close. Her eyes flicked up to his face, then quickly away. Respect should have been automatic. It always had been. But this time, there was hesitation. Not fear. Not exactly. Something quieter. Awareness. Ryan straightened slightly, his voice steady when he spoke. What is going on in there? The clerk adjusted the papers in her hands, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "Proceedings," she said, her tone neutral, but careful. Ryan's eyes narrowed just a fraction. "I can hear that. I am asking what kind." The clerk hesitated again, just long enough to confirm what he already felt. Something was different. "Internal review," she said finally, her voice lower now. "Oversight hearing." Ryan's jaw tightened. Oversight. The word landed heavier than the others. It was not something that happened casually. Not something that appeared without warning. It meant someone had authority. Real authority. The kind that did not need to announce itself because it was already recognized. "Who is leading it?" he asked, his tone still controlled, but sharper now. The clerk's fingers pressed slightly into the edges of the documents, leaving faint creases along the paper. She glanced toward the door, then back at him. "You should not be standing out here," she said quietly, almost like advice instead of instruction. Ryan did not move. "Answer the question." The clerk swallowed once, then shifted her gaze past him, as if checking whether anyone else was listening. The hallway remained indifferent. Just another moment passing unnoticed. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Chief Oversight," she said. "New appointment." Ryan felt something in his chest settle into place, not comfortably, but firmly, like a piece of a puzzle locking in whether he wanted it to or not. "Brooks, Danielle." The name surfaced again, clearer now, heavier. His eyes moved slowly back to the door, focusing on it with a new kind of attention. Not curiosity anymore. Recognition. Inside, the voice resumed, calm as before, cutting clean through the silence that followed each question. He could hear it now without trying. Each word distinct, deliberate, impossible to ignore. It was the same voice. The one from the hallway. The one that had not reacted. The one that had not rushed. Ryan's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, his shoulders no longer as relaxed as they had been. The confidence he wore did not disappear, but it adjusted, pulling tighter, less certain at the edges. The clerk stepped around him, moving down the hall without another word, her footsteps quick but controlled. Ryan did not stop her. He did not need to. The answer was already there, waiting just beyond that door. He took one slow breath, then another, steadying himself, grounding in what he knew. Position, authority, experience. Those things did not vanish because of a name on a piece of paper. They did not change because of one voice behind a closed door. But as he stood there, listening, feeling the weight of that voice settle deeper into the space around him, he could not ignore the shift happening beneath the surface. Not visible, not loud, but real. His hand lifted slightly, hovering near the handle again, not touching it, just close enough to feel the cool air that seeped through the thin gap at the frame. And for the first time that morning, Ryan Cole did not feel like he was deciding what happened next. He felt like he was about to find out. Ryan did not open the door. Not yet. His hand hovered there for another second, fingers slightly curled, close enough to feel the faint difference in temperature between the hallway and the room beyond. Then he let it fall again, slow, controlled, like the decision had been made somewhere deeper than conscious thought. Inside, the voice continued, steady as ever, threading through the air with a clarity that made it impossible to ignore. "Let us walk through this one more time," it said, calm but firm. "You filed the report at 8:42, yet the call log shows your unit did not arrive on scene until 8:51. That is a 9-minute gap. Help me understand that." Ryan's jaw tightened, not from anger, but from recognition. That was not a casual question. That was precision. That was someone who knew exactly where to look and how long to hold the silence after asking. He had heard interrogations like that before, had used them himself, but never from the other side. A faint sound followed, a chair shifting, someone clearing their throat, then a response that came too quickly, too eager, like it had been rehearsed but not tested. Ryan exhaled quietly, the breath slower now, heavier. He turned his head slightly, catching his reflection in the glass panel of a nearby office door. For a moment, he studied it. The uniform, the posture, the badge resting against his chest, catching the overhead light in a way that had always felt solid, unquestioned. Today, it looked the same. It just did not feel the same. Behind him, the hallway carried on, but the distance between him and everything else seemed to stretch. The sounds dulled. The movement blurred. His focus stayed locked on that door and the voice behind it. Accuracy is not optional. The voice continued inside. It is the foundation of trust. Without it, everything else collapses. Ryan's fingers flexed again at his side. That sentence landed differently. Not as an accusation. Not even as a warning. It sounded like a standard. A line that had already been drawn long before this moment. He shifted his weight, his stance no longer as relaxed, shoulders squared, but not as loose as before. There was something else now. Awareness. The kind that came when a situation moved beyond routine and into something that required attention. Real attention. A pair of deputies approached from the far end of the hall, their conversation cutting off the moment they noticed him standing there. One of them gave a short nod. Cole. Ryan returned it automatically. What is going on in there? The other deputy asked, his voice lower, cautious. Ryan paused, just for a fraction of a second. The answer sat right there, obvious now, but saying it out loud felt different. Oversight, he said finally, his tone even. The deputies exchanged a glance, brief but meaningful. Today, one of them asked. Ryan nodded once. Looks like it. The two men fell quiet after that, their earlier confidence dimming slightly as they looked toward the same closed door. One of them adjusted his belt, the other shifted his stance, both of them instinctively recalibrating without fully understanding why. Ryan noticed that. Stored it. It was not just him. The feeling was spreading, subtle but real, like a shift in pressure before a storm you could not yet see. Inside the courtroom, the voice paused again, then spoke once more, softer now, but carrying the same weight. We are not here to assign blame, it said. We are here to establish truth. There is a difference. Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in focus. That line mattered. It separated something. Intent from outcome. Authority from responsibility. He had spent years operating in the space between those lines, knowing exactly how far he could push before someone pushed back. But this did not feel like a push. It felt like a boundary that had always been there, now made visible. One of the deputies shifted again. You going in? He asked quietly. Ryan did not answer right away. His gaze stayed fixed on the door, his mind moving through possibilities, through expectations, through the version of this situation that should have made sense. None of them fit cleanly anymore. He took one slow breath, then another, steadying himself, grounding in something familiar. Procedure, presence, control. Those were things he understood, things he could rely on. But as he stood there, listening to that voice continue to move through the room with quiet certainty, he realized something else. Control was not always about who spoke the loudest or stood the closest. Sometimes it belonged to the one who did not need to prove it at all. His hand lifted again, this time not hesitating as long, fingers brushing lightly against the cool metal of the handle. Not opening it. Not yet. Just touching it, like confirming that the line between where he stood and what was waiting on the other side was real. And for the first time that morning, Ryan Cole understood that whatever was happening behind that door was not just another procedure. It was a moment. One that did not ask for his permission to exist. One that would move forward whether he stepped into it or not. Ryan did not realize when his fingers stopped hovering and actually pressed against the handle, but the subtle click beneath his palm made the decision for him. The door gave just enough resistance to remind him it was real, then opened inward with a controlled, quiet motion. The sound of the courtroom shifted instantly, no longer muffled, no longer distant. It settled around him, clear and structured, like stepping into a current that had already been moving long before he arrived. The first thing he noticed was the stillness. Not silence, but focus. Every seat filled, every movement measured. Eyes forward. Attention anchored at the front of the room where the proceedings had already taken shape. Ryan stepped inside, the door closing softly behind him, sealing the hallway away. For a moment, no one acknowledged him. Not because they did not see him, but because what was happening at the front of the room held more weight than his presence. That was new. His gaze moved across the space, scanning automatically. The judge sat elevated, hands folded, watching. Attorneys lined the tables, papers spread but untouched. A court reporter typed steadily, the quiet rhythm of keys marking time in a way that felt almost louder than speech. And then his eyes landed on her. Danielle Brooks stood near the front, exactly where his instincts had told him she would be, but not in the way he had expected. The worn folder was still in her hand, but now it rested against the table beside her, opened, organized, every page aligned with quiet precision. Her posture had not changed, Still straight. Still controlled. But here, it carried something more. Not presence forced into the room, but presence that shaped it. She was not raised above anyone. Not sitting behind a hired desk. Not wearing anything that demanded attention. And yet, everything in the room seemed to orient toward her. Ryan felt his steps slow without intending to. He moved along the back wall, staying out of the central space, but his focus never left her. The voice he had been hearing through the door was unmistakable now. Clear. Measured. Unshaken. So we return to the same point, she said, her tone even, neither accusing nor softening. Your report states one sequence of events. The timeline presents another. Only one of them can be accurate. The man seated at the table shifted, his hands clasping and unclasping in front of him, eyes dropping briefly before lifting again. Ryan watched that, the subtle signs, the small fractures in confidence. He knew those signals. He had read them in others for years. Now he was watching someone else draw them out with nothing but patience and precision. Danielle did not raise her voice. She did not rush. She allowed the silence after her words to stretch just long enough to matter. It was not pressure. It was space. Space that demanded honesty without forcing it. Ryan felt something tighten in his chest, not sharp, but steady, like a realization forming without asking permission. He shifted his stance again, the familiar weight of his badge pressing lightly against his chest. For the first time, it felt less like a shield and more like something being observed. Not directly, not openly, but present in the room all the same. Danielle reached for a page in the folder, turning it with a slow, deliberate motion. The sound of paper sliding against paper carried farther than it should have. We are not here to complicate the truth, she continued. We are here to remove everything that hides it. Her eyes lifted then, not scanning the room, not searching, just moving naturally across the space. For a fraction of a second, they passed over Ryan. There was no reaction, no recognition in the way he expected, just the same calm awareness she had carried in the hallway. And then her gaze moved on. That unsettled him more than anything else. Not being seen as a threat, not being challenged, just being included, measured the same as everyone else. He took a slow breath, grounding himself, but the air felt different in here. Heavier, more honest. The deputies who had been outside slipped in behind him quietly, taking positions along the wall, their earlier confidence subdued into something more attentive. No one spoke out of turn. No one interrupted. The room held itself together under the weight of her voice. Danielle closed the folder gently, her hand resting on top of it for a brief moment before lifting away. Take your time, she said, softer now. Accuracy matters more than speed. The man at the table nodded, slower this time, as if the space she created had finally reached him. Ryan watched it all unfold, each movement, each pause, each word placed exactly where it needed to be. This was not authority the way he understood it. It did not push. It did not demand. It revealed. And standing there at the back of the room, no longer outside, no longer separated by a door, Ryan Cole felt the shift fully settle. Not loud, not dramatic, just undeniable. The kind that changes how a moment is remembered before it is even over. The room did not rush forward after her last sentence. It settled. That was the difference. Where most moments pushed toward a conclusion, this one held its ground, letting the truth arrive on its own terms. Ryan remained at the back, his shoulders squared but no longer relaxed, his attention fixed on Danielle, as if looking away would mean missing something important. The man at the table shifted again, slower this time, his earlier certainty thinning under the weight of the silence she allowed to exist. He cleared his throat once, then again, his fingers pressing lightly against the edge of the table, as if searching for something solid to hold on to. Danielle did not interrupt. She did not fill the space. She simply stood there, present, her posture unchanged, her gaze steady but not invasive. It was not pressure that moved the room. It was clarity. I may have misremembered the exact timing, the man said finally, his voice quieter than before, less certain, each word placed carefully as if it could still be corrected mid-sentence. Ryan felt that shift immediately. Not in volume, in direction. The conversation was no longer being controlled by defense or explanation. It was being guided toward something simpler. Truth, stripped of the layers that usually protected it. Danielle nodded once, not in approval, not in dismissal, just acknowledgement. Then let us correct it, she said, her tone unchanged, calm, steady, unhurried. She reached for the folder again, turning another page with the same measured motion, aligning it in front of her before speaking again. 9 minutes, she continued. That is not a detail. That is a difference. The court reporter's typing slowed slightly, then resumed, each keystroke marking the shift as it was recorded in real time. Ryan's eyes flicked briefly to the reporter, then back to Danielle. Everything here was being captured. Not just words, but intent. That realization settled deeper than he expected. He shifted his weight again, the movement smaller now, more contained, as if he were adjusting to a space where presence mattered more than position. Danielle's voice carried again, softer this time, but no less precise. When timelines change, outcomes change, she said. And when outcomes change, accountability follows. The man at the table lowered his gaze, nodding once, slower, the resistance gone from his posture. The attorneys beside him exchanged a brief glance, their earlier tension replaced with something quieter, more focused. The room had moved. Not dramatically, not loudly, but undeniably. Ryan felt it in the way the air seemed to settle, in the way the attention of everyone present aligned without needing direction. This was not control enforced from above. This was something else. Something earned in real time. He glanced briefly at the deputies beside him. They stood still, their usual restlessness gone, their attention fixed forward just like his. No one shifted unnecessarily. No one spoke out of turn. The space held itself together under a standard that had not been announced, only demonstrated. Danielle closed the folder again, resting her hand lightly on top of it for a moment before lifting it away. Accuracy is not about being perfect, she said. It is about being honest when something is not. Ryan felt that sentence land somewhere deeper than the others. It did not sound like a rule. It sounded like something lived. Something practiced long before this room, long before this moment. His eyes moved to her face again, studying the calm there, the absence of urgency, the absence of ego. There was no need to prove anything. That was what made it undeniable. A quiet shift moved through him then, subtle but clear. Not resistance. Not yet acceptance either. Something in between. Recognition. He had seen authority before. Worn it. Used it. Relied on it. But this was different. It did not demand respect. It revealed why it existed. Danielle's gaze lifted again, moving across the room with the same quiet awareness as before. This time, when her eyes passed over Ryan, they paused for just a fraction longer. Not enough to draw attention. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But enough. There was no challenge in it. No judgment. Just awareness. As if she had already accounted for him in the space without needing to address him directly. Ryan held that look for a second, then two, before her gaze moved on. He did not look away this time. He could not. The moment was small, almost invisible, but it carried weight. The kind that did not announce itself. The kind that stayed. He took a slow breath, steady, controlled, but it did not feel the same as before. The room had changed him in a way he did not fully understand yet. Not through force. Not through confrontation. Through something quieter. Something harder to ignore. And as the proceedings continued, as Danielle's voice moved through the room with that same calm precision, Ryan Cole stood at the back of the courtroom and realized something he had not considered before. Authority did not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrived quietly, stood still, and waited for everyone else to recognize it. The room did not return to what it had been before. Even as the questions continued, even as the court reporter's steady typing resumed its quiet rhythm, something had already shifted beneath the surface. It was no longer just about timelines or reports. It was about something harder to ignore. Ryan felt it in the way no one rushed to fill the silence anymore. In the way each answer seemed to arrive slower, more deliberate, as if the space itself demanded it. Danielle did not move from her position, but the stillness around her carried weight now, the kind that changed how people chose their words. She turned another page, the soft sound of paper brushing against paper cutting through the quiet more clearly than any raised voice could. "Let us correct the record," she said, her tone even, controlled, leaving no room for interpretation. The man at the table nodded again, this time without hesitation, his earlier resistance fully gone. "Yes, ma'am," he said, the words coming out softer, stripped of the confidence he had tried to hold on to before. Ryan noticed that too. Not the words themselves, but the shift behind them. Respect that had not been demanded. Compliance that had not been forced. It had arrived on its own. He adjusted his stance slightly, his boots pressing more firmly into the floor, grounding himself in something familiar. But the feeling did not settle the way it usually did. The badge against his chest felt heavier now, not physically, but in meaning. He had worn it long enough to understand what it represented, but here, in this room, under this kind of scrutiny, it felt like something that could be examined rather than assumed. Danielle's gaze lifted again, scanning the room not for attention, but for alignment. "We are not here to prove who is right," she continued. "We are here to ensure what is right is clear." The words landed clean, without emphasis, but they stayed. Ryan felt them settle somewhere deeper than the others. He had spent years operating in the gray spaces, where clarity could be shaped, where narratives could be guided. But this was different. This was clarity without distortion, and it did not leave much room to stand in between. A faint sound came from the side of the room, a pin dropping, rolling once across the surface of a table before stopping. No one reacted. No one broke focus. The moment passed without disruption. That, more than anything, told Ryan how much control she held without ever reaching for it. His eyes moved to her again, studying the small details now. The way her shoulders remained relaxed. The way her hands moved only when necessary. The way her voice never rose above what the room required. There was no excess. No performance. Just presence. And it was enough. Danielle closed the folder once more, her hand resting briefly on the cover before she spoke again. "We will amend the report," she said. "And we will ensure that the corrected timeline reflects what actually occurred." The man at the table nodded again, this time more firmly, as if something in him had settled as well. Around the room, the tension that had been present at the beginning of the hearing had shifted into something quieter. Not gone, but transformed. Focused. Ryan felt that transformation inside himself too, though he had not chosen it. The certainty he had carried into the hallway earlier that morning had not disappeared, but it had changed shape. It no longer felt untouchable. It felt observed. Measured. He glanced briefly at the deputies beside him again. One of them stood with his hands clasped in front of him now, posture more formal than before, eyes forward, attentive. The other had stopped shifting entirely, his stance steady, grounded in a way that mirrored the room itself. Ryan recognized that instinct. Adjustment. Alignment. It happened when the environment demanded it, even if no one said a word. Danielle's gaze moved once more, passing across the room, and again, it paused on Ryan for just a fraction of a second longer than it needed to. This time, there was something different in it. Not recognition in the way he expected. Not confrontation. Just awareness layered with something quieter. Understanding, perhaps. As if she had already placed him within the context of everything unfolding without needing to address him directly. Ryan held that moment, his expression unchanged, his posture steady, but inside, something shifted again, deeper this time. He could not name it. Not yet. But he felt it. The kind of shift that does not announce itself, but changes how you stand in a room. Danielle turned her attention back to the table, her voice steady as ever. "Accuracy builds trust," she said. "And trust is what holds everything else together." The words settled into the room, not as a conclusion, but as a foundation. Ryan felt them land, not just in the space around him, but somewhere within him as well. And for the first time since he had stepped into that hallway, he was no longer just observing what was happening. He was being affected by it. The shift became undeniable the moment the judge leaned forward, not to interrupt, but to listen more closely. That alone changed the balance of the room. Authority recognizing authority, not through title, but through presence. Ryan noticed it immediately. The subtle adjustment. The way the judge's hands moved from resting to engaged, fingers interlacing with quiet intention. That did not happen often. Not unless something in the room demanded it. Danielle did not acknowledge the change directly. She did not need to. Her posture remained the same, steady, grounded, her attention focused on the matter in front of her. But the room had already aligned itself around her rhythm. "We will proceed with the corrected statement," she said, her voice even, carrying just enough weight to settle the space again. The man at the table nodded, this time without hesitation, his earlier uncertainty replaced with something quieter, more resolved. Paper shifted. A pen moved across the page. The sound of ink meeting paper echoed softly, marking the moment in a way that felt more permanent than any spoken word. Ryan felt his chest tighten slightly, not from tension, but from realization. This was not just a review. It was a recalibration. Not loud, not dramatic, but precise. The kind that changed how things functioned long after the moment passed. He shifted his stance again, but this time the movement felt different. Less about control, more about awareness. His eyes moved once more to Danielle, taking in the details he had missed before. The way her breathing stayed even. The way her shoulders did not rise with the weight of the room. The way her voice never reached for authority, but carried it anyway. This was not performance. It was discipline, built over time, earned in ways he could not yet see, but could no longer ignore. Clarity protects everyone involved, she continued, her tone soft but unwavering. Without it, assumptions take the place of truth. The sentence settled into the room, quiet but firm, like a line drawn without needing to be emphasized. Ryan felt it land again, this time deeper. He had operated in those assumptions before, knew how easily they filled gaps when no one questioned them. But here, in this space, under her presence, those gaps were being closed. One by one, methodically. He glanced briefly toward the attorneys. They were no longer shifting in their seats, no longer exchanging uncertain looks. Their focus had narrowed, aligned with the process unfolding in front of them. Even the court reporter's typing had changed, more deliberate now, as if each word mattered more. Ryan recognized that shift. It happened when a room stopped reacting and started listening. Danielle stepped slightly to the side, not to reposition herself, but to allow the man at the table space to finish his statement. It was a small movement, almost invisible, but it carried meaning. She was not there to dominate the space. She was there to hold it steady. That difference settled into Ryan's understanding slowly, like something he had always known but never fully acknowledged. The man finished writing, his hand pausing before placing the pen down. He looked up, meeting her gaze briefly. "That is accurate," he said, his voice steady now, grounded in something more solid than before. Danielle gave a single nod. Not approval, not praise, just acknowledgement of alignment. "Then we move forward from there," she said. No finality, no declaration, just continuation. Ryan felt something shift again, sharper this time. Forward. That was what this was about. Not punishment, not correction for the sake of control. Movement. Progress built on truth. Instead of assumption. It was a different kind of authority, one he had not been trained to recognize. A quiet sound pulled his attention for a moment. One of the deputies beside him adjusted his stance, then stilled again, as if catching himself mid-motion. Even that small action felt louder in the room now, more noticeable. The space had changed how people carried themselves. Ryan felt it in his own posture. The way he stood, the way he breathed. Nothing external had forced that change. It had happened internally, without permission, without instruction. Danielle's gaze lifted once more, moving across the room, steady, aware. When it reached Ryan again, it held for a fraction longer than before. This time, there was no question in it. No need to assess. Just recognition. Clear. Undeniable. As if she already understood exactly where he stood in this moment, without needing to call it out. Ryan did not look away. He held that look, his expression controlled, his stance firm, but something inside him had already shifted past the point of denial. Not fear, not yet acceptance, but something closer to understanding. The kind that changes how you carry your own authority. Danielle turned her attention back to the proceedings, her voice continuing with the same calm precision as before. The room followed her without hesitation, and Ryan Cole, standing at the back of that courtroom, realized that whatever power he thought he held when he stepped into that hallway earlier that morning no longer felt the same. Not diminished, not taken, just redefined. The moment did not announce itself, but Ryan felt it before it happened. A shift, subtle but unmistakable, like the room had reached a point where something more than procedure was about to unfold. Danielle closed the folder once again, but this time her hand did not leave it immediately. Her fingers rested there for a second longer, as if marking a transition that did not need to be spoken. The courtroom remained still, every movement paused in quiet anticipation. Then she looked up, not at the table, not at the judge, past them, toward the back of the room, toward him. Officer Ryan Cole, she said, her voice calm, steady, carrying through the space without effort. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The name alone was enough. Ryan felt it land before he moved. His shoulders tightened just slightly, a reflex he did not control. Around him, the room shifted again, attention redirecting, not abruptly, but with purpose. Heads turned. Eyes followed the line of her gaze until they reached him. For the first time since he had entered, he was no longer part of the background. He was the focus. He stepped forward automatically, one step, then another, his boots sounding louder than they should have against the floor. Each step measured, controlled, but carrying a weight that had not been there before. He stopped a few feet from the center, not too close, not too far, his posture straight, his expression composed. The version of himself he knew how to present. Danielle watched him for a moment, not evaluating, not judging, just acknowledging his presence in the same way she had acknowledged everyone else in the room. Equal. Unfiltered. You were present in the hallway earlier this morning, she said. It was not a question. Ryan nodded once. Yes. His voice came out steady, but it felt different to him, like it was being heard in a way he was not used to. Danielle inclined her head slightly, as if confirming something already understood. And you interacted with individuals moving through that space. Again, not a question. Ryan felt a brief pause inside himself, the space where instinct usually filled in quickly, confidently. This time, it did not rush. Yes, he said again, slower now. The room held the silence that followed, not pressing, not forcing, just waiting. Danielle's gaze remained on him, steady, calm, the same presence she had carried from the beginning. This review is not limited to reports, she said. It extends to conduct. All conduct. The words settled into the space between them, not sharp, not accusatory, but clear. Ryan felt them land, felt the weight of them extend beyond the moment into something broader. Conduct. Not just what was written, what was done. He shifted his weight slightly, grounding himself, but the movement felt smaller than before, less certain. Danielle took a single step forward, closing the distance just enough to change the dynamic without altering her posture. When people move through these halls, she continued, they carry more than documents. They carry trust. And how that trust is met matters. Ryan held her gaze now, not out of defiance, not out of challenge, but because looking away felt like stepping out of something he had already entered. He understood what she was doing, even if she had not said it directly. She was not accusing him. She was placing him within the same standard she had applied to everyone else. No more, no less. The room remained silent, but it was no longer passive. It was attentive, aware, every person present understanding that something important was being examined without a single raised voice. Ryan took a slow breath, steadying himself, but the air felt heavier now, like it carried expectation instead of neutrality. He had stood in front of people before, had been questioned, had been challenged, but this was different. There was no confrontation here, no push to defend, just a space that required honesty without demanding it. Danielle's voice softened slightly, not in strength, but in tone. If there is anything that needs to be clarified, she said, this is the moment to do it. The words did not trap him. They opened something. Ryan felt it immediately. The option. The choice. He could stand on what he had always relied on. Position. Authority. Habit. Or he could step into something else. Something less certain, but more real. His eyes dropped for just a fraction of a second, then lifted again, meeting hers fully. The room waited, but it did not pressure. It simply held. And in that quiet, controlled space, Ryan Cole realized that whatever he said next would not just be heard. It would matter. Ryan did not speak right away. The space she gave him held, steady and unbroken, like it had been prepared long before he stepped into it. His breath moved slower now, more deliberate, each inhale settling deeper than the last. He had answered questions his entire career, had navigated conversations like this with practiced ease, but this did not feel like something to navigate. It felt like something to step into. His eyes remained on Danielle, not out of obligation, not out of defiance, but because looking anywhere else would have been dishonest. The room waited, but it did not lean forward. It did not press. It simply existed, allowing whatever came next to arrive on its own terms. Ryan's fingers shifted slightly at his side, a small movement, almost unnoticeable, but it grounded him just enough to speak. There was an interaction, he said, his voice steady, but quieter than before, stripped of the edge he usually carried. The words landed differently in the room. Not as a defense, not as a justification, just a statement. Danielle did not interrupt. She did not nod. She did not change her posture at all. She simply listened. That made the next part harder. Ryan felt it immediately. The absence of interruption left no place to hide behind momentum. I handled it, quickly, he continued, the pause in the middle of the sentence subtle, but real. He heard it himself. The room heard it too. Danielle's gaze remained steady, not narrowing, not softening, just present. Quickly, she repeated, not questioning, just returning the word to him, allowing it to settle with its full weight. Ryan swallowed once, the motion small but visible. He had used that word before. Many times. It had always worked. It had always justified moving forward without looking back. But here, in this space, it did not carry the same certainty. It sounded incomplete. He felt the gap in it. Danielle took a small step closer again, not closing distance in a way that pressured, but enough to keep the moment grounded between them. And was it handled accurately? She asked, her voice still calm, still even, but now carrying something else. Not challenge. Clarity. Ryan felt that question settle deeper than anything she had said so far. It did not ask what he did. It asked how he understood it. His eyes dropped for just a fraction of a second, then lifted again, meeting hers fully. The room remained still. No movement. No distraction. Just that space, held open, waiting. He exhaled slowly, the breath leaving him more heavily than he expected. No, he said. The word was quiet, but it did not need volume. It carried. It landed. It stayed. A subtle shift moved through the room. Not loud, not visible, but present. Not judgment. Not reaction. Recognition. Danielle held his gaze for a moment longer, then gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Not approval. Not relief. Just acknowledgement. Then that is where we begin, she said. Her voice did not change. It did not rise or soften. It remained exactly as it had been from the start. Consistent. Grounded. Certain. Ryan felt something release in his chest. Not completely, not all at once, but enough to notice. The tension that had been building. Since the hallway did not disappear, but it shifted. It no longer felt like something he had to hold up. It felt like something he could finally see clearly. Danielle stepped back slightly, returning the space between them to its original balance. This process is not about perfection, she continued. It is about correction. And correction begins with honesty. The words settled into the room, not as instruction, but as structure. Something that would remain long after the moment passed. Ryan stood there, his posture still straight, his presence still firm, but something inside him had changed shape. The certainty he had relied on was no longer the same, but it had not collapsed. It had adjusted, refocused. The deputies behind him remained still, their earlier unease replaced with something quieter, more grounded. The attorneys at the table did not shift. The judge remained attentive. The room had not fractured under the moment. It had held. Danielle turned slightly, her attention moving back toward the proceedings, but before she fully shifted away, her gaze passed over Ryan one more time. This time, there was something different in it. Not just awareness. Not just understanding. Something closer to acknowledgement of what he had chosen in that moment. He held that look briefly, then let it pass as she returned to the table. The hearing continued, the rhythm of the room steady once more, but nothing felt the same as it had before. Ryan took a slow breath, grounding himself again, but the air felt clearer now, less heavy, as if something had been removed without force. And standing there, no longer resisting the shift, no longer trying to control it, Ryan Cole understood something he had not allowed himself to consider before. Authority was not just about being right. It was about being willing to admit when you were not. The hearing did not end with a gavel or a raised voice. It ended the way it had unfolded, quietly, precisely, with each piece falling into place without needing to be forced. Papers were gathered. Pens set down. Chairs shifted back with soft, controlled movements. The room exhaled, not in relief, but in completion. Danielle closed the folder one final time, her hand resting on it for a brief second before she lifted it from the table. The weight of it did not seem heavy in her grasp. It looked like something she had carried long before this moment, long before this room. She turned slightly, acknowledging the judge with a small nod, then stepped away from the front without pause, without ceremony. No one stopped her. No one needed to. The work had already been done. Ryan remained where he was for a second longer than necessary, his posture still, his eyes following her movement as she walked toward the aisle. The space seemed to adjust around her again, not parting, not shifting dramatically, just making room in a way that felt natural, unforced. He noticed the small things now. The way people stepped aside without being asked. The way conversations did not immediately resume. The way attention lingered, even as the formal structure of the hearing dissolved. He had seen people command rooms before. He had been one of them. But this was not command. This was something else. Something quieter. Something that did not end when the moment did. Danielle moved past the front row, her steps even, unhurried, the same controlled pace she had carried from the beginning. When she reached the aisle where Ryan stood, she did not slow, but she did not ignore him either. Her gaze lifted, meeting his for a brief moment as she approached. Up close, there was nothing different about her expression. No trace of what had just happened. No sign that she needed acknowledgement or response. Just the same calm presence, unchanged. Ryan felt the moment settle between them before she reached him. Not tension, not discomfort, just awareness. He straightened slightly, not out of habit this time, but out of something closer to respect. The kind that did not need to be displayed. The kind that simply existed. She stopped for half a second, just enough to acknowledge his presence fully. Not as an officer, not as a position, as a person. "Thank you for your honesty," she said, her voice quiet, the same steady tone that had held the room together. No emphasis, no weight added to the words. Just truth, offered and left as it was. Ryan nodded once, the motion small, controlled, but real. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, his voice steady, but different now. Not defensive, not automatic. Present. She held his gaze for a fraction of a second longer, then gave a slight nod in return, not formal, not distant, just acknowledgement. And then she continued past him, her steps carrying her toward the door, toward the hallway where the morning had begun. Ryan turned his head slightly as she moved by, watching as she reached the exit. The door opened, light from the hallway spilling into the room for a brief second before it closed behind her again. The sound was soft, final. The room behind him began to move again, conversations returning in low tones, chairs shifting, the ordinary rhythm of the courthouse reassembling itself piece by piece. But Ryan did not move right away. He stood there, still at the back, his hand resting lightly against his belt, his breathing steady, his mind quieter than it had been all morning. The badge on his chest felt the same. The uniform had not changed. The hallway outside would look exactly as it had before. But something inside him had shifted in a way that did not need to be announced. He took one slow breath, then stepped forward, not toward the front, not toward the center, but toward the door she had just walked through. When he pushed it open, the hallway greeted him with the same pale light, the same steady movement of people passing by, the same quiet hum of a building that never stopped. But it did not feel the same. He stepped out, the door closing softly behind him, and for a brief moment, he paused, standing in the space where everything had started. The memory of it lingered. The words, the silence, the choice he had made. He adjusted his posture slightly, not correcting it, just settling into it differently. Then he moved forward, his steps steady, his presence unchanged to anyone passing by. But inside, something had been redefined. Not taken, not broken, just seen more clearly than before. And as he walked down that same hallway, under the same lights, through the same space where he had once believed control belonged to him, Ryan Cole understood something he would carry long after the moment had passed. Power could make people move, but dignity made them choose to.